You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide, toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com and all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our radio site, where you can listen to the X-Zone 7/24/365, as well as our live broadcast, Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. until midnight, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Well, we played last hour the live feed from CNN. Thank you to CNN for allowing us to use the feed. And I must tell you that I'm a little surprised that Donald Trump did not win the Iowa caucus on the side of the Republicans. The Democratic side is still very tight. Let me see, with Hillary Clinton at 49.8% of the vote and Bernie Sanders 49.5%. Already we've seen two people fall out. We've seen O'Malley fall, as well as Senator Huckabee. What Jeb Bush is still doing in this race, I have no idea. I'm sure people throughout the Republican Party are saying, Jeb, wake up. Jeb, wake up. Somebody check Jeb to see if he's got a pulse. Well, he's got a pulse, but you know, this is just one of the many things we have to look at in this race. And what I've decided to do, I asked a good friend of the X-Zone, Richard DeRose, to join us. In 1998, Richard published a book entitled Retail to Hell, Why We Need to Fear the Information Highway, Superstores, and Superpowers. The book foretold how the greatest economic power ever conceived, the U.S., would fail in just a decade if we didn't change its course of action. In the book, he told how, why, and when. You know what? No one listened. That's right. No one listened, and now it's coming true. Joining me now is our good friend Richard DeRose. Richard, welcome back to the X-Zone.
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be back.
Hey, buddy, what the heck happened tonight? Like, I really believed, and I am a Trump supporter. I haven't held back any holds on that. What happened with Trump? Was it because he missed the Fox debate, that he was beat by Ted Cruz?
I think it had a lot to do with it, but it was a strategy. I think he, actually knew what he was doing. For example, and I'm just going to be up front with it.
Sure.
I just read something about Putin warning Trump that he may, there may be an assassination attempt against his life. We're dealing with some significant situation here where, a lot of people are threatened by the fact that if he gets in power and he starts changing things, even with Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders isn't really considered that, serious a candidate. But Trump could change things for everybody. And we're talking about millions upon millions of dollars and this and the other. Crony capitalism has taken over the system. And then in my book, you talked about Retail to Hell. I warned about that, but there's also these other factors, like superpowers and an information highway, costing jobs and superstores, even like Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's. All those have had a major impact on the employment in this country, and therefore probably around the world, since we, so many countries rely on us for economic stability and growth and stuff. So Trump is a real threat, and I'm not so sure that he doesn't realize that, and he's sort of backing off in a way because it's a strategy he has where if I can be beat, maybe I'm not worth killing.
You know, when we look at Trump's history, like this is the first time, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, where he's actually actively partaken in any political race.
That's right. That's what I understand.
So
we talked about it before, but never got into it. Yeah.
So, Rich, why do you think he has done so well?
Well, I think the real reason is people are just frustrated, and he captured that emotion that maybe this one big guy, this multi-billionaire guy, can come in there and actually change something. But despite that, because of some of the rhetoric he's put out there and the misinformation that was put out after that, they started thinking, is this guy really trustable? He's kind of like Ronald Reagan was before he got to be president. All of a sudden, everybody liked him.
But when you look at Ted Cruz, here you have a Canadian who was born in Calgary, Alberta, who went down to the States, renounced his Canadian citizenship not that long ago, to run as president of the United States. What does this tell you about the character of the man? If he's willing to give up his rights to the country where he was born for his political aspirations.
Right. It says a lot about him, and I think in time you're going to see him self-destruct.
Really?
Yeah, he was lucky tonight. He came out with just, 4%?
Yep.
Not even getting 30% of the Republican votes. It doesn't bode well for him in a state where he should have won or could have won. And, he won't do well in New Hampshire, and he won't do well in South Carolina. So this is probably the last big thing for him. But the one you got to really think about is the incumbent-type cabinet candidate in the Republican Party, which is Rubio. Sort of the guy backing up Bush. If Bush doesn't make it, the Bush name doesn't work, then we got Marco Rubio, who also is Cuban.
Right.
Both his parents were Cuban. They weren't U.S. citizens when they came here, and they came during the Batista government, and not during Castro's takeover. And he was born here, and then years later they became U.S. citizens. So some people might call him an anchor baby, but I don't know if that's completely correct because they didn't, come here, have a baby, and leave. But Trump sort of hinted, that might be the case.
Sure. When we look at the big picture, and we also look at, Bernie Sanders. Let me see, where is he at?
He was at 49.5 when he hit last time.
Well, let me see. I'm trying to get the numbers here. No. He was about 10%. He was about 10%. Kasich is at 2%. Fiorina is at 2%. Jeb Bush is at 2%. Carson, 9%. So if you look at Carson, Paul, Bush, Fiorina, should they stick around or should they just say, hey, guys, it was a good going. Thanks a lot, but we suck?
Yeah, I think they'll back out, just like Huckabee did tonight. He's backing out.
Do you think Huckabee going to the Donald Trump event last week will help Huckabee in the future?
Well, it's hard to say. They were just really supporting the veterans.
Right.
And they did their debate. They didn't just back out like Trump did. And once that was over with, they showed up, him and Rick Santorum. And, so they were just kind of showing their support. It helped Trump in one way.
What does it tell you, Rich, when Donald Trump, within 24 hours, can raise $6 million for the veterans?
Well, it says a lot of what he can do. And he's a very powerful man in that way. And I think, like you say, that America would benefit from the fact of him being president because we know for a fact that all across this nation in education and every other aspect, just about, people that get into office today are just basically failures. I can tell you from my own personal experience that this kind of corruption, and in this case it's 50% basically, break between the two, but, so many people still support her with all her baggage, all the things she's done. The fact they have to know that she's lying about a lot of the things she says. She's not about it. She's all about making money for herself and enriching herself. And they still support her. And that's kind of scary in a democracy, that you can let people vote that don't seem to care enough about who they are and what their system's all about to not make rational, logical decisions.
Why is the process of electing a candidate so drawn out? Why does it take so long? Why isn't there a shorter way of doing it? Why does there have to be so much money spent? Isn't it hard on the American public?
It is, and one way, like you're talking about the money, it requires that they get a lot of money. I think Bush, they said, had $59 million just still in his slush fund, not including the PAC money.
Right.
That's a lot of money, and so Rubio and the rest of them don't have it. Now, he might get some of Bush's money because, like I say, he's basically a party candidate, Republican Party candidate. And so when you get into a situation like that, it takes money, and people go for that. They see the money, and they say to themselves that, well, he must be the one. I don't want to lose my vote, so I'll just vote. And what you end up is with the same kind of government, nothing changing. We're going down this path, like Rubio talks about, of self-destruction, and we can't seem to get out of it.
Rich, do you think that Secretary Clinton will be charged for the crimes that she is being investigated for?
Well, she certainly should be. She's done something very bad and hurt a lot of people. There's information out there that I'm sure the Soviets and the Chinese know all about, who are basically our enemies, and other people may know as well. But she doesn't seem to care, and I don't think a lot of the electorate does. They just seem to think, well, it's okay. It's okay. A lot of the people that are, really voting for Bernie Sanders are voting for him because they're scared of crony capitalism, and they think that basically capitalism has failed, and somehow the only thing left is socialism. And that's scary in itself because we know for a fact that socialism doesn't bring prosperity. Margaret Thatcher said that it's the greatest system, until the money runs out. And, the money's already basically run out, so how he thinks he can change things around and make it better. I happen to be a capitalist, but I don't believe at all in crony capitalism.
Is there any advantage, in your opinion, to having a former president in the same White House as the actual president? Would Bill's knowledge, after having been president, be an asset to the country?
I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is, and I understand this from just coming from Sean Hannity, Fox News, that about 13 women are going to come out and make accusations about, his sexual improprieties and dealing with them. And, we saw what happened to
Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. Things are changing in that way, and it's not going to be good. It's going to be a nasty race from here on out. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be good.
Do you think President Obama will protect Hillary?
Up to a point. I think he's wondering who can he put in her place. This late in the game, it's kind of tough, and I think they don't really want Bernie Sanders. That's too far to the left.
Yeah.
But what are they going to do? And then I think Bernie Sanders will easily get beat. He'll do okay, 30-40% of the vote, but whoever the Republican is, unless he really messes up, he should win, and then you'll have a Republican House and Senate and the president.
What about Michael Bloomberg, if he was to throw his hat into the ring? How do you think Michael Bloomberg would fare?
Well, as an independent, I don't think he'll do that well. He'll get, some of the vote, but he'll probably hurt a lot of, Bernie's supporters.
Right.
It would have gone from, Clinton to him to support the Democrat.
What do you think the number one topic when it comes to the candidates, both on the Democratic and the Republican side, really is? What is the vote changer?
Well, it's interesting that Trump comes out with this illegal immigration, and it really took off. And, to me, I understand exactly what he's talking about because I studied this issue in quite a lot of detail. And it's bankrupting the United States because there's one number that comes out that's costing the American taxpayers about $900 billion. We're about $1 trillion in deficit every year. If you took that out, now they're producing some good because they're producing product and some sales tax, but not real income tax. But the fact they're so migrant and they move on is hurting in the system. And of course, we'd have smaller schools and this, that, and the other, but that'd be less taxes for the taxpayer to pay, property owners, if they didn't have to pay, for all these schools that we don't necessarily need anymore. Where I'm at, probably about, I'd say half the students, 3/4 of them are black, and the rest of them are Hispanic, and a few whites in the public schools.
Is it too late for the U.S. to turn itself around?
Well, that's what I said in '98. We have a limited time to do this. I think it's too late now because what people don't fully understand about the system we have, it has its limitations. And you can't ask too much of it. Like in '98, you probably could have put in this, national health care system.
Right.
And but now, we're so far into debt, it's going to be difficult to do anything like that. And even Obamacare, and as much as people may want, health care like they have in Canada, it's not going to be an easy thing to do.
In your opinion, who is the best person to take over the presidency, whether it's Democratic or whether it's Republican, based on your experience and the great amount of knowledge that you've been able to, to grasp onto over the many years?
Well, I'd say, like you do, it's Donald Trump. Yeah. But the thing is, can we trust him? Is he really who he says he is? Has he changed? And everybody can change. And I think he's looking back on his life and saying, that I made all these, billions of dollars, but what's it worth to my kids and even me if and my grandkids if the system fails? And I know what's wrong with it. I know how to fix it, and I can do that. If he's true to those, beliefs, you remember in the Bible that Saul was a commander that went after a lot of Christians and executed them, and later he became Paul, who wrote a good part of the Bible. So there is a chance things can change, but I think that's what a lot of people have about Trump because of some of the stuff he does. But it's interesting how he reacts, like that statement he made in about being able to kill somebody on Wall Street or wherever it was.
Yep.
That was taken out of context.
Well, sure.
And so, but the media, he gives the media a chance to do that. But on the other side of the coin, he's building a base of, or at least he's sucking the oxygen out of the room, as they say, where, he's getting all the attention and nobody else gets anything. And so Marco Rubio has done well in the sense that he's been able to, go past that. But he's sort of like a, talking head in a suit or whatever you want to call him, a very attractive guy that seems to say the right things, but he wanted to be president of the United States back when he was about 7 years old, and he's basically built his whole life around doing that. So it goes to show you how, in a sense, narcissistic he is. Of course, they all are narcissistic. We can't say they're not because you wouldn't even run for president if you weren't. But, he's kind of a scary guy in that respect, too. I mean, somebody thinking about being president at that early an age and then working through everything he's ever done, basically, to get there.
Something I've noticed, Richard, and I'm sure you have, and listeners to our show have also noticed, is that there's no news in the news about ISIS.
Here lately, right?
Yeah. What's your take on that?
Well, I think they want to be a situation where they balance power, and this caliphate thing, and Sharia law, and this, that, and the other are all kind of things that we use to build military support. My stepfather used to work at the Pentagon when I was much younger, and I remember him telling me that the industrial complex itself will make up an enemy if there's not one out there, and a military industrial complex. And so what you're seeing here is that they have to create an enemy, and I'm not so sure that we're not in our own way supporting them to try to make them strong. And Saudi Arabia's involved, and even Rupert Murdoch with, Fox News and Roger Ailes, they're all tied in with the Saudi Arabians. I think that Prince owns like 7% of Rupert Murdoch's company. So, this is all interconnected in its own way. Interesting.
What's your opinion of Ted Cruz? Do you think that Ted is actually a natural-born citizen of the U.S., and should he be able to run for president?
No, I think he's not qualified that way because here's the problem, is up until Obama got into office and then, his basically 8 years, 7.5, almost whatever, people were the same people that were fighting against that. In other words, let's hypothetically say that Barack Obama was born in Kenya, and he, was insistent on that, but his mother was an American citizen. The same situation for Ted Cruz, right? His mother's an American citizen. He was born in Canada.
Right.
Well, he knew better than to come out and say, yeah, I was born in Kenya. So he said, I'm born in Hawaii. I'm not going to produce my birth certificate and this, that, and the other until after he gets to be president. But Hillary Clinton was the one that went after him on that and got an affidavit from his grandmother and also his aunt, who lived in the United States for years, and he had nothing to do with her. And she said she used to babysit him. But once he got into office, got elected, then his grandmother recanted her statement. That was a sworn statement. And so, but Barack Obama knew that being a natural-born citizen is what James Madison wanted to say, was you had to be born in the land, because psychologically you're tied to that land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people have died over the centuries just fighting for, the place where they were born.
Sure.
Whether it be their local community or their state or their government, federal government. It's just what it is, and they knew that. Those guys were smart like that, and they knew for president we have to have somebody born in this country. And Ted Cruz, as sneaky as he is in that way, has put his people that support him in a jeopardy situation, because I think that argument's going to be more and more pronounced, particularly, against the Democrats.
Yeah, I have a problem with anyone who denounces their country. Especially the United States or Canada, because let's admit it, we are very fortunate. We are very lucky. We are very privileged to live in our countries. That's how I see it. But when you've got somebody like, I just have to break in over here with 99% of the polls reporting in the in the Democratic caucuses, both Clinton and Sanders are in a dead heat. Something that they've never seen before. Anyway, we'll keep our eyes on that. So if hey, listen, I've got to tell you something. I'm glad Cruz is no longer a Canadian, because he's showing his real colors. So what happens if he doesn't win and he's just a senator? Is he going to cry about it? Is he going to cry that he gave up his Canadian citizenship, which I'm glad he did? How can you trust anyone who does that?
Right. I've heard this about Canada, that if you want a good life, move to Canada. If you want to make money, move to the United States. So if you're looking at a good life as being the more valuable thing, not just money,
right?
then why wouldn't he want to be, Prime Minister of Canada, versus the United States? But the United States has more clout,
right?
The president's number one, so
yeah.
I guess that's what he wants, and that's his, narcissistic way of looking at life.
What I see when I see how the United States is run, it's run like a business. Like you've got a president and you've got Congress and the Senate, which to me are just other names for the board of directors and so on and so forth. It's a company. And yet when I look at Canada and other we've got a prime minister, and we are still attached to the crown. Is this difference important in the world stage, where you're running the country as a business and not as a country?
Well, I think you're right about that. It's a good analogy, because what we've seen here is it is like a big business,
mm-hmm.
and we've been running the world in a sense with new products and services and this, that, and the other. I mean, a lot of them come from the United States, so
right.
It's really about profits, and that's what capitalism is making profits. And then Adam Smith's invisible hand was, that basically everybody working through their own self-greedy way would somehow benefit other people. In other words, if you needed a truck and I was in that area, so
mm-hmm.
I'll make truck, so somebody else decides to make, the feed to put in the trucks, and then somebody develops the gas and refines it so that the truck can run it, and that's the invisible hand. Everybody in their own way picking out something they can do. Doesn't mean they're going to be successful at it, but it seemed to work for years, and now all of a sudden it's like this hand's coming back to choke us to death.
Do you think that if Senator Cruz actually wins the nomination, whether it be Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, do you think that he has a chance of winning the presidency?
I don't think Bernie Sanders does. I'm not so sure about Hillary, if she can get past all these
mm-hmm.
problems, because I don't have great faith in the electorate in America anymore. It's just sort of falling apart. I don't understand their values.
But let's say Senator Cruz is the candidate for the Republican Party, and he is against the Democrats, whether it is Secretary Clinton or Senator Sanders. Do you think that Ted Cruz could actually win the election over the Democratic nominations?
That's going to be hard to do. I think, the Republicans will rally around him, but I don't think independents will. He's very tough to deal with. He's very, Trump says, nobody really likes him.
Right.
And he's just that kind of person. But Trump can pull off that stunt and embarrass people and this, that, and the other, and they finally say, I'm going to go along with him because I don't want to be embarrassed. Cruz doesn't have that talent. So when he ticks people off, they're going to be ticked off. And people who get ticked off have a way of coming back and trying to get even. So I think we're going to have pretty much the same 4 to 8 years if he did get elected of what we've seen right now. It's just nobody working together to make anything work.
You and I touched briefly on Hillary. Do you think that she will be indicted for her email scandal?
Well, like I said, I hope she will, but I'm really kind of leery that the Justice Department will actually do anything. What I've read, behind the scenes,
right,
is that the FBI worried about their credibility because of what's happening to police in general in the United States and their reputation, that they don't want to lose that credibility they have right now. And what will people say? Well, if you didn't prosecute her, by damn, you're going to prosecute me.
That's right.
Kind of attitude. You can have this rebellion going on. So she shouldn't be above the law. And at this particular time, with the police getting beaten up and the justice system and Congress, all these people are coming in at very low. Like, I think cockroaches are rated better than what we see in Congress.
Hey, Richard, stand by, my friend. You and I every time I see a cockroach now, I'm going to think about Congress. You and I have to take a short break. We'll be right back. Always great talking to you, good friend. Okay. Exo Nation, Richard DeRose. I love that analogy. Richard DeRose is our special guest, and Richard's going to be back with us in a couple of weeks talking more. He was kind enough to accept our invitation to come on tonight. And Richard, always love having you here on the show. Exo Nation, Richard DeRose, and I will be back on the other side of this brief break as we continue. We're right here live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. My email address is exxon@exxonradiotv.com. On all on all social networks, www.exxonradiotv.com or Exxon Radio TV. And you can always listen to the Exxon 724-365 at www.exxonradiotv.com. Richard DeRose and I return on the other side of this short break. Don't go away. Jeff Gilson didn't go out looking for adventure, danger, or the answers to most of the controversial political intrigues of the past 30 years. But he found all three when he began investigating the mysterious death of his close friend, Margaret Thatcher's favorite speechwriter. Just an ordinary guy living in a small, sleepy suburb 20 miles outside of London, Jeff's questions provoked a powerful response on both sides of the Atlantic. He was shot at, warned off by the CIA, and formed a close bond with one of Israel's most notorious intelligence officers. Relive Jeff's gripping adventure in his fast-paced book, Maggie's Hammer. Peel away the layers of establishment deception and discover, as Jeff did, that his friend was an assassin with British intelligence, that Great Britain has been America's secret hitman for the past 30 years, and that Princess Diana was not the target in that Parisian tunnel. All of this and more when you visit www.maggieshammer.com and find the link to buying this explosive book online. More and more ordinary people feel they no longer have control of their lives. Jeff fought back. He asked the difficult questions. He set out to redesign his own destiny, and you can do the same using Maggie's Hammer as your guide. Don't waste a moment. Buy it today. Visit www.maggieshammer.com. You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor. Buying foreign property is an exciting and complex adventure. It can also be very time-consuming and costly if you don't have the best information and resources at hand. Roost provides professional real estate services and assistance to an international clientele of foreign property investors and rental apartment owners in Budapest. For more information on Roost, visit their website at www.roost.co. That's www.rooste.co.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Welcome back, everyone. Richard DeRose is our special guest this hour. It's always great having Richard on the show. Richard, what's the website where people can go and find out more about you and get copies of your books?
BrainwashedAreYou.com.
That's BrainwashedAreYou.com. By the way, Richard, the latest poll numbers, not poll numbers, geez, I'm starting to sound like Donald Trump. The most current numbers in the Democratic race in the Iowa caucuses is that Secretary of State Clinton has 49.8%, and Governor Sanders or Senator Sanders has 49.6%. Has there ever been, to your knowledge, a race so close in Iowa between two candidates?
Not that I know of. And it's interesting, too, the Democratic side of the equation always usually predicts, who's going to win the nomination.
Right.
Where the Republican side, up until like 2000, when George W. Bush ran, he was the last one, in 16 years to actually win Iowa and go on to become, president.
Talking about Donald Trump, as we did before, what do you think was behind him really walking out of the Fox debate last week?
Well, I think it goes back to Rupert Murdoch was trying to set him up. He'd want to sabotage him in some way, and I think he basically felt like, I don't need to be playing into this game, and let people see what Cruz is really up to. I mean, the more I look at Cruz, the less I like him.
Right.
I was kind of for him at the beginning. But what that did, which hurt Trump, was to help Marco Rubio, because he did much better. Everybody said he won the debate, and even though Cruz was trying his best to win, he just couldn't quite pull it off. So even though he's a great debater, Rubio seems to be the kind of person that people seem to like more. And he talked emotionally about stuff and, things like that, which make him come off, less, crude than Cruz, I guess.
Do you think that Trump actually had a problem with Megyn Kelly, or is this all part of one of Trump's more spectacular grandstands?
I think it had a lot to do with his grandstanding. He used her, and it was part of that, though, because they wouldn't take her off, and he wanted her not to be on. And when I saw her do what she did in the first debate, it really pissed me off. In fact, I've put stuff out on the internet that's gotten good response, mainly on Fox News, and they leave the stuff up that I put out there. I think I sent you a link.
Yes, you did.
From Howard Stern.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you who she really is. She's not a true Republican. She's just in it for the money, and she's going to please Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch. That's just who she is, and so she can pull Trump down. And she's a very powerful person. She's very attractive. She's very smart. Unlike what Trump says about her, she's not second rate.
Right.
And I don't think he's afraid of her. He just didn't want to deal with it. And then I think he had other things going on that like I said, he didn't want Rupert Murdoch to get the upper hand this early in the game. And even Ronald Reagan in 1980, they say, didn't go to the Iowa, the debate before Iowa, and he lost. But he made all the others after that. And of course, he won the nomination in the presidency.
Why is it that these caucuses are actually done? Why isn't it the public who makes this decision instead of these different caucuses?
Well, they want to eliminate the candidates. Otherwise, you'd have, so many, like 17, 18, 20, 25
right.
or so running. So that's what the two-party system does. Now, whether the two-party system's good for America? Absolutely not. It's too controlled. So we don't get the best people running because they won't get in office. You got to go along to get along. And that's one of the problems we have in this country right now. It's crony capitalism. Everybody's sold out. And good people get in office. They see the power that exists. They get scared to go against it, knowing that it'll run somebody against them, this, that, and the other. It's going to cost them a lot of money, and they always go along with them.
Let me ask you a question here, Rich, because you wrote your book on the retail industry, basically going to the crapper, no time flat. What do you think of the financial status of China with the Chinese stock market basically continuing to go down?
Well, we've got a very dangerous situation in the world. Russia's in a lot of trouble. I think one of the reasons that oil prices are so low is, the powers to be in the United States that kind of control oil, they decided they were going to hurt Russia because Russia was getting out of control, and they put these, sort of sanctions against them and pushing down the price of oil because Russia has so much oil and is now able to export it. And it went too far. Now all of a sudden it's like, I can't believe this is happening. We don't have any control over it. And Saudi Arabia is talking about, or actually Iraq is talking about putting out more oil because they need the money. And it's just an ongoing vicious cycle of, we might see gas go down in the United States to 99 cents a gallon. We hadn't seen in years.
99 cents a gallon. This afternoon, my wife and I paid 79.3 cents per liter. And so that was I love it. Personally, I love it, but I know that this is a dangerous sign when gas starts going down, and they're saying that the cost of crude oil, a barrel of crude oil, is at an all-time low nearly.
Well, they say it takes $15 for Russia to just get the oil out of the ground. That doesn't include, distribution costs and stuff like that. So that's risky, because Russia, when countries get in trouble, they start wars. They look for a common enemy. And who is the enemy of Russia? It's the United States. We got sanctions out against the Soviet Union, not the old Soviet Union, but Russia. And, you got a situation here that, could lead to World War III. And then you got someone like Christie talking about no-fly zones, and if a Russian jet flies into it, we'll shoot it down. Well, that's how wars get started. This could lead to World War III.
Do you think the media has too much power these days?
I think the media is doing a terrible job. They sold out a long time ago. They got bought out. And the people that stand up, just like the old Chinese proverb, the nail that stands up gets hammered down. And almost everybody is just playing a game. I went to the University of Georgia, Grady College of Journalism, and graduated in 2014, just a little bit in May. And almost all the teachers over there, professors, were saying how disappointed they were in the press. And that's basically what happened. American press sold out. So we don't have that, fourth checks and balance that we used to have, where, people were trying to get stories and undercover corruption and try to get things to change. It's all about the two-party system and what those people want, and they're playing us like fools to make us think that somehow they're doing a good job in exposing things.
I find it really sad when the motto for any media outlet is, if it don't bleed, it don't lead.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And another thing is, one of the things they taught us in school was, it's not what's right or wrong or good or bad or anything like that. The whole point of media today is to bring the audience to the advertisers, which gets down to the business model you talk about, the money. And that's why they've sold out like they have, because, if it doesn't ring true and people don't want to listen to it, they don't want to cover it.
Something else, my gang and I, that's what I call my group of employees that we meet every morning, is that not only has ISIS disappeared from the news, but so has the racial problems that are starting to raise their ugly heads in the United States. And then nobody's talking about illegal immigration. Nobody's talking about, like you and I said before, ISIS. They're concentrating solely on the different caucuses.
Right. Because that's where the audience is. The people want to know what's going on. They get tired of a story. Yeah. Audiences can't stay engaged for long. And so if your just sole purpose is to get that audience to listen to your TV station, and the audiences are so much smaller than they used to be since there's so much activity out there, and a lot of people are just completely tuning out, the network news and the Fox News and all the other stuff, CNN. They just don't want the problems. They don't want to hear about it, Maybe they're getting older and their blood pressure's getting too high, but, one of the biggest programs in the United States is that show that has all the different, remodeling and, doing, flipping houses and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. It's a big show right now, and I got kind of used to it myself.
When I watch CNN, because the Canadian news channel I find is very boring, watching CNN, what they do is they basically repeat the same stories throughout the day with different anchors.
Well, Fox News is doing the same thing. If it's a hot story, every single one of the different anchors from Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity or Megyn Kelly, they're saying the same thing over and over again. Because for one thing, someone might not be tuned in for 3 or 4 hours; they're just tuning in for an hour or two. So they want to make sure they get that hot story, and that makes really the media kind of boring in its own way.
Yeah, sure it does. So what's next for Richard DeRose? How many books have you got out there so far, Rich?
2. I've got the Brainwashed Are You, and then the Retail to Hell. I'm not really sure. Kind of sitting here waiting to see what happens. Brainwashed Are You is basically a book about sort of modern interpretation of the Bible, talking about these basically end-time events. I see everything is sort of coming together. The one thing we're kind of lacking now is the Antichrist, and at first you're thinking if Trump's doing that well, there's a possibility he's beating everybody, and could he be the Antichrist? Because a lot of people think that maybe the new pope is the false prophet, and then you got the situation with China and Russia. China's in trouble, serious trouble, and Russia is too. So will they start World War III? I mean, the timing's right for a lot of this stuff to happen, but you've got to have all these players fall into place, and things go, and then you don't know, another 20, 30 years can go by, and nothing's basically happened.
Just over these past couple of days, the United States sent a destroyer, I believe, within miles of the islands that China is creating outside of the territorial lines of China. What are we seeing here? Are we seeing a flexing of muscles? Because if it is, isn't the United States in a position where they could just wipe China away?
I think it's the other way around. I mean, economically, there's so much stuff made over there, and we're a market economy. Everybody depends on goods and services being sold, even if it's at Christmas time, You've got to have those sales tax dollars coming in, this, that, and other. And right now, it might take another 10 or 15 years if we put 100% effort into trying to bring some of that manufacturing back like Trump promises to do. Then you might be self-sufficient. But right now, we don't even make nails, fasteners, and other strategic products in the United States that we would need, to sustain ourselves.
Well, where does that blame go, Rich? Whose idea was to outsource everything and put the American economy in the sad state it is, especially when it comes to the unemployment problem?
Well, I think it was all about greed. That's what made me come up with this book, Retail to Hell.
Mm-hmm.
I actually owned a hardware store, and I called Dave Hoddick, the head of Ace Hardware, and said, hey, Lowe's and these other people are just killing us. We need to have more, cheaper goods.
Right.
So they started getting into the cheaper, products. So in 1990, I had like 80% U.S.-made hardware.
Right.
Nails, hammers, this, that, and the other. By 96, it was about flip-flop the other way. And you'd get a nice set of tools in that were, in a nice, attractive-looking blister pack, and what you would have to sell it for $40, you now can sell for 10 or 12 or 14 to compete with Home Depot and Lowe's and other companies like that at that time. And but you had to start thinking, hey, is this long-term the best way to do this? And that's what I came up with the book, Retail to Hell. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized this is a very serious problem that's going to come to a head one day, and we're not going to be prepared to deal with it.
Rich, you and I have to say so long for tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. You're going to be on with us, I believe, next month sometime. So listen, first of all, thanks for coming on tonight. Thanks for giving us your share and your looks into the caucus elections that were held tonight in Iowa. And to you, my friend, thanks very much. Great talking to you.
Okay, great talking to you, Rob.
Exonation, if you'd like to get more information about Richard DeRose and his books, visit his website at www.howbrainwashedareYou.com. That's howbrainwashedareYou.com. Let me see, this is the final hour, so this is it for us tonight, Exonation. I'll be back tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It is truly a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we come to you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network. So from everyone here to everyone out there, take care of each other, and always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.